Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 15th episode of EnergyBin Insights, the webinar series that explores solutions for PV repair, resale, and recycling. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Schmidt, and I am the Marketing Communications Manager here at EnergyBin. We are an online business-to-business community for PV life cycle professionals, which includes recycling, repair, and resale, who are committed to accelerating a robust and sustainable secondary market. Our members collaborate via trade, networking, and educational activities like this webinar. These webinars are made possible by collaboration with industry professionals like yourselves. Join EnergyBin to help support these efforts to buy and sell equipment on our safe trading platform and to network with your industry peers. If you would like to be a guest on an upcoming webinar, please drop me a brief topic proposal in my email. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to access recordings for this episode and other EnergyBin Insights webinars. Today's presentation is all about applied AI to quickly and accurately appraise assets. Our guest speaker, Nick Kumleben, is the Chief Business Development Officer and one of 3 co-founders at Buckstop. And he will share about a solution to tackle today's intelligence gap that keeps us from achieving a seamless circular economy. Thanks to those of you who submitted questions in advance. We'll make an effort to answer your questions throughout today's presentation. I'll also share Nick's contact information here for you to reach out to him directly should you have additional questions. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here. EnergyBin's a fantastic resource for us, and I've really enjoyed a number of the podcasts you put out, so pleased to be on.
Thank you. Yes. Why don't you start out by telling us about your background and how you got involved with Buckstop?
Certainly, happy to. As you can guess from the accent, I'm not from the States originally. I grew up between the UK and South Africa, came over to America about a decade ago, and have since been working in various parts of the energy transition, mostly in investment advisory roles. I've worked at a geopolitical advisory firm, at a hedge fund focused on the energy transition, and in private equity-backed clean energy development. A few years ago, with this background in commodity and energy markets, I got very focused on the problem of critical minerals, the minerals that we need for an electrified and decarbonized economy. And those minerals are interesting for 2 reasons. Firstly, because there isn't a lot of supply outside of China in many of these markets, which creates a geopolitical problem for the US and the West. And secondly, because as we move to economy based on fuels to one based on electrification and decarbonized energy sources, we're going to need a lot more of them. But it takes a really long time to bring new sources of minerals online, up to 3 decades in the United States. So I started to think, okay, well, how much of these crucial materials do we have embedded in the economy around us, and how can we keep them out of landfill? I then spent some time with an old friend of mine, Alexander Olson, one of my co-founders at Buckstop, who had started and run a vertically integrated electronics manufacturer, Babylon, in Richmond, Virginia. Alexander was telling me about the problems he'd faced when his assets, these are modular hydroponic farms, came back at end of life, and they couldn't really find a solution to recycle the valuable metals in these assets because they were complex electronic assets. So we started to look at the recycling rate in the US and various circularity metrics, and figured out that the problem was that there was an information gap between the asset owner of these electronic assets and the recycling markets. The asset owners knew they had something of value, but didn't know what it was worth. And so they couldn't accurately explain to either scrap dealers or at scale shredding and smelting plants what was in these assets and how they could recover value from them and provide both financial, environmental, upside, and end of life. We looked at the data available out there. We looked at the advancements in artificial intelligence and sophisticated computing techniques to draw information about these assets, and decided we thought we had a way to solve this problem by figuring out what's in assets, what we call an algorithmic assay, and then helping asset owners find circular solutions.
And hence Buckstop was born not that long ago
Exactly.
either, I believe. Like as in earlier this year was your launch date?
That's right. Yeah, we've been working on the idea for around 2 years now. We launched as a company with 4 co-founders in early July of this year. We took our beta product for AI generated appraisals with a focus on the solar industry to market in mid-September. We've got a very exciting group of pilot customers who we're working closely with to refine that from a beta to a first product, and we're very excited about the progress we've made so far. Going forward, we'll expand that beyond solar. Obviously, there's a lot more that we can do in solar as the historical growth of the industry results in more and more assets coming offline. But we also plan to take the framework that we've built for the solar industry and apply it to, among others, battery storage, data centers, and various other parts of the e-waste economy.
Very exciting. Well, I think this has been about the third or fourth time I've personally had the privilege of speaking with you. And I, for one, have picked up on your passion or your personal drive. Would you mind sharing with our audience, what is it that gets you up every morning? What inspires you to keep doing what you do?
Thanks. That's very kind of you to say. I think from my perspective, I see what we are doing and the broader circularity space as an opportunity to solve 2 of the most pressing challenges of our time, which I mentioned a little bit in the intro. The first is that we just need more metals to build a decarbonized economy. The US recycles around 20% of electronic waste, which is a much lower figure than comparable advanced economies. That figure's up around 40% in Europe, and in parts of East Asia as high as 80 to 90%. So they're great examples for us to learn from. And it's also a national security challenge. As we've seen over the last few months, being reliant on China for key inputs in our economy is not a feasible solution going forward. And in terms of growing the market for circular solutions in the electronics waste space, I think not only are we helping solve those national and environmental challenges, but we're also providing financial upside for asset owners who are otherwise paying for trash hauling, leaving assets in landfill, and hopefully we can solve some of those problems together. I find that a really exciting and inspiring challenge, and I'm excited to jump out of bed every morning and try and play a small part in solving it.
Yes, and thank you for doing something about it instead of just complaining about it on the internet. I love that part of my job, working with people like you who are those solution providers to make this happen. And another maybe benefit to all of this, I would think, is we always hear time is money. So how can we accelerate the turnaround of these valuable materials to go back in and build new products and meet the growing demand? Because that's not going to slow down anytime soon. And that's part of the issue with trade barriers or things getting held up in customs. My own brother just started a business and I ordered him something special to commemorate that. Didn't realize the seller was overseas, and lo and behold, it got stuck in customs and I didn't know if I would get it in time for Thanksgiving. So I feel the pain on a personal level, and then on a grand scale of your supply chains getting all needing to pivot and respond to all of these challenges that have come up. If we continue to make these goods and these materials more accessible and quickly transferable right here in our own countries, I would imagine that would be a huge benefit as well.
Hugely, and I think that's why we like the framing of urban mining. Urban mining is a term that was coined in Japan in the 1980s. And Japan is in some ways a great analog to where we are today in the US because it has this very large industrialized economy, which requires significant mineral inputs of all kinds, but it doesn't actually have a lot of minerals below the ground in Japan itself. So they've had to think very hard about supply security in the Japanese government and industry, and then look for innovative solutions to solve those problems. One of those key solutions has been the urban mine, and that process of tracking not just what's embedded in the economy, but finding innovative ways through partnerships between originators, recyclers, and processors, and end users has been really successful in other parts of the world. What we want to do is put the informational pieces together to help that happen here in the US.
That's really great. Let's get into that. Now, we all have heard the buzz of AI, and that is partly where urban mining is pulling from in terms of Buckstop's appraisal solution. Tell us about that, your solution, and address the applicable product categories that the system can appraise today.
Yeah, happy to. So at a basic level, what we do is to build very, very large databases through a combination of proprietary research and artificial intelligence on industries and get to a place where we understand not just the resale value of assets, but what they're made of, this algorithmic assay concept I referenced before. And we then use that information on both material content and valuation to help asset owners understand what their assets are worth on a live basis. Why don't we jump into a demo here so that I can show you guys what this practice. And today we're focused on solar, as you know, given our conversations, but we're expanding this out to a number of other sectors and always looking for feedback from partners in the space on what else they'd like to see on the platform. I will share screen and we can jump right in.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Let's dive in. So what we have here is essentially a appraisal tool that draws, and this site is public, so anyone who would like to can have a link and come and play around on it. What we ask for is that customers provide us with enough information about the assets to tell them what they're made of and what they're worth. We need to know the manufacturer, the make, the model, the wattage, the condition and location. We can take that data and match it back to our database of deployed assets in order to provide a valuation. I'm going to show you what that looks like for a demo file here. And we match the data provided in the asset list, whether it's from an asset list, from engineering diagrams, from an ERP system, to our database of around 162,000 assets in the solar sector, covering panels, racking, inverters, and so on and so forth. We figure out what those assets are, and then we provide you with a live valuation, drawing both from resale markets that EnergyBin and others have done so much to develop, and commodity and recycling markets for specialized assets like this. I think, as a lot of people in the space know, this has historically been a fairly painful and manual process, right? You have to figure out what you have, and then you might have to test it. You might have to pull it apart. You might have to run some manual tests on resale sites to figure out where you are. What we want to do is make that process a lot quicker, less time consuming, and thus more financially viable for asset owners to get their assets into the circular economy, either through resale or through recycling. So what we have here is essentially summary insights about the assets, an estimate of fair market value and salvage values, and then a few features that are coming soon. We will build some reports around asset recovery, track shipping, and so on and so forth. If we look here at what we're looking at for the fleet value, the fair market value is around $335,000 for 40,000 assets that we've appraised across 26 different product lines. The salvage value here is you'll see that's negative, and that reflects the reality of the solar market today, right? As you all know, there are vibrant panel resale markets, EnergyBin principal among those, but there are also there are also charges today for recycling of panels because the current recycling technology struggles to extract all of the value from that's embedded within an asset. We are hugely optimistic about the potential for improvements in recycling. And we know that a number of the recyclers are working on really innovative processes, everything from biogenic recycling to focusing on the most valuable minerals within these panels. But today, it's a charge. What we've got here is essentially a list of the assets that we've appraised, right? So you can see this by product line, and you can see on a product by product basis what is the salvage value that that your assets have on a line by line basis. What is the fair market value, i.e., for sale with a bit of time to get them sold? And if you really need them sold now, what are you looking at in terms of the OLV? We work across today mounting systems, solar inverters, and solar panels, track the condition of the assets. Is this asset damaged, in which case it needs to flow into the recycling markets? Or if it's in good condition, is it on the resale market? Is it on the resale markets? Should you be listing it on EnergyBin? And if so, what's a guide price based on the data we've seen to do that? We track the critical mineral composition. This is very relevant for both in terms of underwriting recycling values, so customers can understand they're getting a good deal on their assets, and in terms of understanding the avoided emissions from recycling, the minerals kept in circulation, and a number of other relevant points here. One thing that's pretty important too, as we see it, especially in resale markets, and I know this is something that EnergyBin does a great job, is thinking a little bit about the warranty, right? If you're still in the manufacturer's warranty, then there's a different perspective on what an asset's worth. Whereas for some older assets, if you're not in warranty, you might have to be a little more creative around where you resell it, or drive it into scrap markets. That's also something we can cover in our database. On the raw material content, you'll see this here, and we focus today on what can be extracted from the assets available. So, for instance, those in the solar space will know there are small amounts of silver in every panel. We don't see those as being extracted today and value being provided, so we don't focus on that. But that will come down the line as the recycling industry scales. We focus here on where the assets are. So here we've got a portfolio across a number of jurisdictions in the US. Provide a regulatory tracker so that asset owners can understand. Okay, for instance, for my assets in Virginia, there's electronic waste EPR, which may cover some of these assets. There are battery recycling mandates. But in other places, there are landfill bans, there are right to repair legislations, which can drive a refurbishment, the development of a refurbishment market. So we also provide asset owners with the clarity to understand on the regulatory compliance side what else they need. And then we're in the early stages of building out some freight information. Obviously, the price paid by the end user is only one part of this calculation, and understanding, for my assets, how many trucks am I going to need? How many pallets might I be able to get on there? And what a freight information and what a freight cost might charge lets me know whether it's going to be worth my time to list these assets, and what the end price might be in order to get them. So I'll pause there because I'm sure I've thrown a lot at you guys, and I'm sure there are
Oh,
further
it's
thoughts.
super helpful though to see this and as you explain through it. Um, and I think we can even add some value to your explanation by maybe describing a few typical use cases. There was a question that came in from an EPC operator who was asking specifically about how this solution process would work for an in-place underperforming PV array for the purpose of refinancing. So maybe you could start with that scenario, and then if there are other
Yeah,
typical use cases, then that can help people connect the dots to see, oh, okay, this is how I can really use this in my business today.
that's a great question, Melissa, and appreciate you going there. If we were looking at an underperforming array like that, we'd grade it together and then focus in a scenario of repowering whereby the asset owner wanted to keep, say, the racking and the inverter and the wiring in place, but replace the panels with new panels. We could look at a specific level and product line. We could look at the salvage cost and the resale value of those assets. Now, the grading here would matter a lot. What condition is it in? Um, and we could help the asset owner get a product by product understanding of where the value lies um, in their deployed assets, and inform the cost benefit of the repowering there. Beyond those repowering scenarios, which is a big focus for us, there are a number of other use cases. Though the developers on the platform will and the EPCs will understand the importance of decommissioning bonds in a lot of jurisdictions, and the need to estimate both decommissioning cost and, in many places, the salvage value of assets before a project even gets deployed. We can help there with a what we think is the fastest and a very accurate solution for calculating the value of those assets at end of life, and make that salvage value calculation as part of your decommissioning estimate painless and very smooth, and backed up by both historical data and transparent calculations. That's relevant not just to EPCs and operators, but also to the financial firms who are engaged in insuring, surety bonds, and the other financial parts of this ecosystem.
Yes, definitely.
Once a project's been commissioned, to the extent that valuations are necessary for, say, audits, annual financial reporting, we can provide a rapid or consistent, on a subscription basis, access to the platform for these valuations. We can then also, in an M&A transaction, provide an opinion as to the residual value of assets. We hear from buyers of assets that they see all kinds of residual value in bid sheets, and we hope to bring a little more transparency to that process. And then, of course, when it actually gets to end of life or repowering and resale of some of the assets, we can provide asset owners with a sense of what value they might receive. We would then we then direct them to platforms like EnergyBin, who are operating marketplaces, and help them actually put those assets into the circular economy.
That's awesome. Really good. Let's
Thank you.
see. I have another question that I'm sure some of the other listeners on this call right now are thinking about, and it actually comes from an industry researcher who is talking about or questioning the data validation, which obviously is all on our minds with all this AI
Hmm.
talk. So, how has Buckstop's solution been validated? And maybe perhaps this is the $1 million question. Is the value of raw materials recovered post recycling or for direct reuse or post repair?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that. I do want to say in that I think there are a lot of great both academic and governmental sources that we've worked with. There are also industry participants. Let me take those questions sequentially. On the question of what is being shown here, this salvage value figure reflects the market today. So while there are dollar values on the critical minerals and minerals contained in the panels, those values do not correspond perfectly with what a recycler is going to pay you because they've got their own costs and their own margin. So if we look at, say, a $10 or $15 a panel recycling charge, that doesn't account for all of the value contained in a solar panel because the recycling process isn't perfect today, rapidly improving, but it's still in the early stages of building out that industry. And so,
And I would like
yeah,
to interject, even in a mature market like the used car market, I believe I saw your colleague was featured in PV Magazine
yeah.
recently, and Buckstop was compared to the Kelly Blue Book of the
Hmm.
solar industry. So even knowing that earlier this year, I just traded in my vehicle for a newer model, and I go on Kelly Blue Book, put in all my information as accurately as I can. I get a range of here's what I might get from the dealership. And then once I get there, of course, the dealership has their own algorithm that they're using, and it's pretty close to Kelly Blue Book's
Yeah.
estimation, but I would imagine that's the same as using Buckstop. If you think of it in that terms, there's always going to be a variance, but it will be pretty close.
That's right. And we think the Kelly Blue Book is a great example. As this product comes out of beta and goes to market, we think that it's likely we'll end up with ranges that we have high confidence in rather than a firm number because um, the market can move in a short period of time and one wants to account for the slightly different financial arrangements in everything from offtake to gate fee charges that that recyclers and on the resale side, the margin is going to vary. So this will likely look more like the Kelly Blue Book as we develop it, and you'll see a range of a range quoted rather than a firm number. And then I want to also touch on this question around data validation. So we work closely with partners in the recycling and resale world who help us understand what the values are in market terms, EnergyBin principle among those. We also work with a range of academic and industry groups. We're in discussions with some of the US government labs about refining the solution together based on a fantastic public data sets they've put together. We work closely. We're a member of SEA, the Solar Industry Associate, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and we work closely with their team. So there are also what you might think of as non-profit sources, i.e., someone who's not taking a margin on this that are helping us validate the data. And that's an exercise of continuous improvement, right? There's a flywheel there for every asset you look at, you learn more, especially when you're dealing with people who are experts in the space and can tell you, actually, this number's slightly off, or today we're seeing a slightly different value, say. I spent part of this morning updating some of our numbers on inverters, for instance, and That's just the nature of the business. As we develop this and we move to ranges, we also plan to include confidence scores and understand and give our partners a sense of why a particular range might be relatively wide.
That's really great to include that transparency.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's see. Well, yeah, okay, you showed down below in this model the different regulations, I believe, and maybe that is good to touch a little bit more on the importance of why we need an appraisal tool with respect to compliance and regulation. Maybe you can share an example of specifically how we can use this part of the tool to help with this growing of the circular economy.
Certainly happy to, and it's a great question. Thanks, Melissa. I think the relevance here on the regulatory side operates across a couple different stages of the life cycle, right? On the front end, decommissioning bond regulations require a degree of financial transparency before the project even gets before the project even gets built, right? On the permitting side. And then if we look at the regulations covered here, if I'm a solar operator, say in Washington State, I've got a landfill ban already in place, and I need to either find a certified recycler, or I need to find a reseller who can get these panels redeployed, because I don't have the option of just putting them in a dumpster. There are also a number of different panel technologies that classify as hazardous waste in many different jurisdictions. So as we look more and more into that, that's going to become very relevant on the waste disposal side. I think it's also really important to just touch on why this kind of compliance matters at an industry level, right? And you and I are both in the solar circularity space. Those listening to us are likely developers, operators, EPCs, at a time when energy has become more than a little bit politicized, and solar energy, key among that, being extremely responsible stewards of both the local environment in terms of what we put into landfill, but also at a national level in terms of keeping our assets in circulation and helping solve some of the national security challenges we've referenced is extremely important. There are great bodies doing work in this. I think SIA are really principal among them, but we're trying to provide the visibility that our customers need to both be compliant but then also to go one step beyond to be good citizens.
I like that a lot. Yeah, whether or not it's lawful, the push is in many cases and in other industries as well, coming from our customers.
Yep.
To show how they are environmentally, socially responsible with their ESG goals, and they want to put out sustainability reports to their stakeholders and so forth and so on. So even if it's under some kind of regulation or not, it's just the right thing to do. And that'll sustain your business for the long term if you do what's right today.
Absolutely.
Okay, but it's not. Oh, I wanted to ask though. So you had mentioned early on in the demo that there are still some different features in development. So maybe that's a good way to segue into what Buckstop's short-term goals are.
Absolutely. So thank you for mentioning that, because it's a great opportunity to talk about them. In the near term, our focus is really on working with more and more partners in this space to refine the beta model that I just showed you into essentially a system of record for valuations in the industry. We've got a great pilot cohort. We've taken in over a dozen partners, and we're working closely with them to refine our solution to make sure that we're accurately valuing both the mineral content of assets, accurately tracking the recycling market, and then to make sure we're up to speed with how the resale market's developing with EnergyBin and others. The the relevance of what we're doing from now is really going to be focused on finding more and more of those pilot customers, seeing more and more challenging valuations, and refining this model. So if you're listening to this and you focus on soil circularity, either in academia, at a reseller or recycler, or you're an asset owner looking for valuations of your assets that are fast and are backed up by transparent data, we would love to talk to you. Once in the near term, we're also going through the same data collection exercise in battery storage, right? And so many of the solar developers today who are putting assets in the ground are also at the same time developing storage assets, large scale batteries, and that's a big focus for us and something we look forward to launching in the new year. So partners in that space are very welcome as well.
That's great. Let's switch gears. We like to stay optimistic about the future of renewable energy and solar in particular. But we also are all realistic and know that there are foreseeable challenges that need to be sorted in order to move forward with closing this intelligence gap and for a fast functioning circular economy. Would you explain maybe what some of the internal challenges for Buckstop are, and then external challenges, especially as well for the industry at large? And maybe following up that, for the industry at large, since so many wonderful people are on this webinar, what is like one practical thing that people can do today to help move things forward?
That's a great question. I think as we talk about the challenge we face, from our perspective, the biggest challenge we face in this sector is just the scale of growth that's going to happen, and it's baked into the cake today, right? If we look at what's coming offline, say either 10 to 15 years in because an inverter breaks and a developer looks at repowering, or because a PPA ends, or because you want to repower a project before tax credits expire. Because solar's been growing so fast the last 10 years, we're now about to hit that period of exponential growth in resale and recycling markets. We think the value of resold panels is going to, or the secondary market value, I should say, in the United States alone is going to go from roughly 700 million today to 1.8 billion by 2030. That's aligned with where SIA and others are. So I think for us as a sector, the difficulty is going to be in meeting that demand, and we need transparent and vetted marketplaces like EnergyBin. We need valuations from Buckstop and from other firms in the space, and we need to be able to rapidly scale the quantity of resale and recycled panels, not just in the US, but globally. And everyone has a part to play in that, from the resellers who are taking end-of-life panels and deploying them around the world, to the recyclers who are investing in new processing technologies. I think that's the biggest challenge for us, because if these panels start to flow into landfill or don't find circular solutions at end of life, the volume of that waste generation is going to grow exponentially. And that's a real challenge for us as an industry.
And I love how you're hinting that ideally it would be wonderful if an array made it all the way to end of life before it was decommissioned, but in reality that's not always the case. And even on EnergyBin, we've seen decommissioned panels for resale that were just 6 months installed. And for whatever reason, perhaps some were damaged in a hailstorm, but others were not. But then the insurance company paid for the total repower of the entire system, so they just went ahead and and replaced everything, or whatever the case may be. But the reality is, especially if panels and other valuable assets are 10 years or younger, I would say, for the wholesale market, and if they are sold in bulk volume, this is where our authorized resellers
Oh,
are saying there is value there.
oh,
They're probably, you'll spend more money in recycling at this point, but yet these can be installed for at least another 15, 20 years in some cases. And one other opportunity I'd like to point out is perhaps new companies who are looking for um, expanding their revenue portfolios would want to consider what it could take to add third-party warranties, like other industries have already. The extended warranties from the manufacturers for products, so that that can help advance the resale market even further.
oh. Yeah, I totally agree. And this one's personal for me growing up in South Africa. There's if you listen to the World Bank, there's 1.1 billion people in the world who don't have access to reliable energy. I've seen that firsthand. We have over the last few years, we've had rolling blackouts at home, and I call my parents and check that their rooftop solar and battery system is working okay. And to the extent that you can take panels that might no longer be fit for deployment in a competitive utility scale market in the United States and redeploy them either off grid in the US, where there are still communities with energy access and energy poverty challenges, or around the world where people are in desperate need of more reliable energy solutions and fairly sensitive in terms of how much money they have to spend on that. It's a win-win from a financial perspective, from a social perspective, and from an environmental perspective.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for pointing that out. So now let's jump ahead in time. Where do you see the industry and your company headed in the next 5 or 10 years' time? I know you had those
Mm-hmm.
numbers you quoted that we're expected to see an exponential growth in the secondary market for resale and recycling. But what else do you predict?
It's a great question. I want to start with something you brought up actually, which is the auto industry. Um, and that is where I think we would love to see the electronics and renewables sector move towards. Around 97% of cars in the US are recycled. It's probably the most circular major industry in the world. As you will have found out in Kelly Blue Book, pretty much all cars have more than one owner throughout their life. And that circular infrastructure exists really, really well because these things have long useful lives and they're made of valuable minerals so they can be recycled at end of life. I think that's true for so much more. And so I would love to see the industry move towards a more circular focus, not just for environmental and financial reasons. I think as we move into an economy that not only runs on electricity to power vehicles, to heat homes, to power data centers and the artificial intelligence value chain, but also as we continue to decarbonize our economy, we're going to need so much more of these minerals, but we're also going to have a lot more of these assets to redeploy, be it solar panels, be it inverters, be it battery storage systems, be it copper wiring and transmission, or the server racks in data centers. So the economy as a whole should be moving towards this circular this circular model for both financial and environmental reasons. And we at Buckstop want to provide the valuation layer that makes that possible and contributes to the growth of marketplaces like EnergyBin, and then also contributes to the bottom line for our customers. So
That's
as big a
excellent.
role in that and we can play, it would be great.
Yes, the more industries, the better. So, how can our listeners learn more about you or Buckstop? I'll put your contact information up again.
Thank you.
Um, I know you and your two co-founders are very active on LinkedIn. So that is one place I know people can learn more
Yeah.
about you.
We are very active, and I've got to give a shout out here to our fourth co-founder, Brad Harrop, who is our CTO. We let Brad get on with the important work of building the product rather than posting on LinkedIn. But the three of us, Alexander,
Oh,
Grayson, and
sorry,
myself, are
Brad.
no
I didn't
worries.
know about Brad.
No
So
worries.
four co-founders. There you go.
Brad does fantastic work.
So there's Brad, Alexander, Grayson, and Nick.
That's right. And you can reach out as Melissa's kindly put my contact information up on the screen here. You can also go to buckstop.com, and we've got a nice little pop-up that will let you put your information in for more, for some more information about what we're doing. We'll also be releasing a white paper on decommissioning bonds in the very near future. We're excited to discuss some of the insights we've gleaned from public records around the different ways of estimating salvage value for solar projects, and some of the issues we see there. So we'll give you a little teaser for that, and rest assured we'll be promoting it on social media.
Excellent. And we definitely appreciate Buckstop's membership to EnergyBin as well, and look forward to doing more collaborative work together going forward as well to help with the data validation and whatever else we find ourselves getting into with content and other opportunities to come. So thank you, Nick, and your team for that. And we've come to the end of our time today. Thank you, Nick, for sharing about how this agentic AI appraisal system works and why it matters to the solar industry and hopefully more industries to come in the near future.
Thank you, Melissa. This is a very valuable partnership for us, and I'm really appreciative of the chance to explain what we're doing to a wider audience.
And to learn more about Buckstop, the urban mining company, visit buckstop.com. And later this afternoon, I'll send an email with Nick's contact information again and the recording for this webinar. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye for now.